5,000 years ago. I mean, think about that for a second. Long before the Greeks, long before the Romans, there was a civilization that just completely rewrote the rules of what was possible. They were, without a doubt, the world's first truly great engineers, and the things they built still leave us scratching our heads today. Their story is really one of ambition on a scale that's almost hard to wrap your mind around.
You know, that quote just says it all, doesn't it? They didn't just stack bricks. They engineered a legacy meant to last for eternity, all driven by god-kings who held absolute, unquestionable power.
So, that's the big question, right? How on earth did they do it? Well, it's an incredible story of genius, a whole lot of trial and error, and this relentless, almost obsessive drive to bring order to a world of chaos. And it all starts with a river. The Nile. You have to understand, the Nile was everything to Egypt. It was the lifeblood, the absolute reason the world's first great empire could even exist in the middle of a desert. But here's the thing, that same lifeblood could also be a deadly poison. This was the central paradox of Egyptian life. Every single year, the Nile would flood, and that was a good thing. It would leave behind this rich black silt that made the land incredibly fertile, a farmer's paradise. But if that flood was just a little too high, it turned into a monster, wiping out villages, destroying crops, and leading to mass starvation. So for the early Egyptians, life was this constant knife's edge between incredible abundance and total annihilation. So what do? Well, if you're the very first pharaoh, a guy named Menes, you don't just accept it. You decide you're going to impose your will on nature itself. To keep his brand new capital city safe, his engineers built a massive 49-foot-high dam that literally changed the course of the Nile. It was the first huge engineering project in a long, long line of pharaohs bringing order to chaos. Okay, so the river is under control. What's next? Well, Egypt's ambition didn't just stop at the riverbanks. It turned skyward. The next great challenge was to build a literal stairway to the heavens for their god-kings, and this kicked off an architectural arms race that would define their civilization. Now, in the beginning, the royal tombs were, well, surprisingly simple. They were called mastabas, which were basically these rectangular mud brick structures, kind of like a house for the dead, built on top of a burial chamber. But let's be real, if you see yourself as a living god, a mud hut probably isn't going to cut it for eternity. And this was the moment everything changed. Pharaoh Djoser and his brilliant right-hand man Imhotep made a decision that was completely revolutionary. They decided to ditch the mud brick and build the world's first massive superstructure made entirely out of stone, a material that would last forever. And this is where you see the sheer genius of it all. Imhotep didn't just build a bigger mastaba. No, he stacked 6 of them, one right on top of the other, making each one a little smaller than the one below it. And just like that, he creates the world's first step pyramid. This innovation totally set the stage for that final, iconic shape, the true smooth-sided pyramid, which was meant to look like the rays of the sun god Ra shining down to earth. But, getting to that perfect pyramid shape, it was not a straight line. It took the obsession of one particular pharaoh, Snefru, who was absolutely determined to build the first true smooth-sided pyramid. And his quest? Well, it was basically a series of spectacular failures. So Snefru's first try at a place called Medum was a total disaster. The entire outer casing just collapsed into a giant pile of rubble. But he didn't give up. He tried again at Djoser. This time, though, they built it on shaky ground, and the pyramid started cracking under its own immense weight. His engineers totally panicked and had to change the angle halfway up. The result? The very awkward-looking bent pyramid. But you know what? He learned from every single mistake. On his third and final try, the red pyramid, they got it right. They used a safer, more stable angle and a solid foundation. And after decades of trying, he finally had it. The world's first perfect, true pyramid. All right, let's fast forward a few centuries. The empire is getting bigger, and engineering starts to become less about the afterlife and more about projecting power in this life. It becomes a tool of war, a tool of control, and a tool of political propaganda. A perfect example is this warrior pharaoh, Sosiris III. To control the rich gold mines and trade routes down south in Nubia, he built a whole chain of massive fortresses along the Nile. This was a very clear, very loud message.
Do not mess with Egypt. And we're not talking about a simple wall here. No way. This was military architecture, so far ahead of its time it wouldn't be matched for another 1,000 years. An enemy would have to get past a deep moat, then breach multiple layers of walls, all while being peppered with arrows from protected loopholes and giant towers. These things were engineered to be almost unconquerable. But, imperial power isn't just about forts and armies, is it? It's about image. It's propaganda, creating a story that says you have the absolute right to rule. And nobody understood this better than Hatshepsut, one of the first powerful female rulers in history. To hold on to power in a man's world, she had to act like a man. So in all her official statues and carvings, she's shown with a male body and even wears the pharaoh's ceremonial false beard. Her ultimate power play, though, her stunning mortuary temple. It is an absolute architectural masterpiece, for sure, but it's also pure propaganda carved in stone. The walls are covered with these incredibly detailed stories of her divine birth, claiming that the great god Amun was her real father. It was an undeniable statement of her right to be pharaoh. But if we're talking about ego, if we're talking about self-promotion, nobody, and I mean nobody, comes close to Ramesses II, Ramesses the Great. He ruled at the absolute peak of Egypt's power and wealth, and he used every single ounce of it to make sure that no one would ever forget his name. And he had plenty of time to do it. The man ruled for 67 years. 67. That gave him decades to just plaster his name and his face on pretty much every single monument in the entire empire. He also really pushed this image of himself as a symbol of supreme virility and strength. They called him the Bull of Egypt. And get this, he fathered more than 100 children. He was making sure his divine bloodline would be around for a long time. And of course, his monuments were as massive as his ego. Just look at the 4 statues of himself guarding his temple at Abu Simbel. They are nearly 70 feet tall. The message could not be more clear. This isn't just a king. This is a god on earth. And if you need one thing to perfectly sum up the scale of his ego, this is it. Inside his own temple, there are carvings showing Ramesses the pharaoh making offerings to Ramesses the god. The man literally made himself a god while he was still alive. It's just, wow. So when you put it all together, the dams, the pyramids, the fortresses, the temples, what was the ultimate goal here? What was the real driving force behind all this incredible engineering? In the end, it was so much more than just building things. It was about creating an entire system. You needed incredible organization to manage all those workers. You needed a powerful belief system that everyone bought into. And at its very core, you needed this fundamental desire to build something that would last forever. It was about engineering immortality itself. And that really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? The things the ancient Egyptians built have outlasted their own civilization by thousands of years. It really makes you wonder about that deep, timeless human need to leave a mark, to build something that stands the test of time and says, I was here.